Okay. So, emotional repression as the doorway to non-dual recognition. And scared of myself, we'll touch what that really means. And fear is love contracted. I've kind of shared this before, but we'll get into some of that. So, yeah. So before we begin, somewhere along the way, we decided an emotion was unsafe and unsafe to feel and express, and built a life around avoiding it. This isn't only something from the past, it's how your life is arranged right now, and most of us are not aware of it. So basically what I want to add here is depression is designed to be hidden, emotional depression. So it's not obvious to most of us. Maybe some of you are here because you're aware of it, but you're starting to know there's something underneath all of this. So it's designed. Its main job is to be hidden, basically. So we keep looking at other things like stories and identities. And the root of suffering is not the story; it is the unfelt emotion underneath it, and I fear of that emotion. So most therapeutic and spiritual approaches work with the narrative, the beliefs, the memories, the events. But working only on stories leaves the actual root untouched. And I'll also add that just working on stories and identity almost reinforces repression too, because it's safer. It gets its needs met, which I will explain, because we keep taking our eyes off it from the repression itself. So we keep working on stories and identity. But that doesn't mean we deny stories and identity. There's difference, right? But we have to see as a belief because it's a programming. It's a unconditional conditioning. So yeah. And this is like a kind of brief, kind of simplify the way that repression is built, like an example. Around one unbearable feeling, the mind builds an entire architecture to keep it hidden. So first of all, something happens, you could say this is trauma, or what happens, a child is ashamed, abandoned, overwhelmed, often by parents or caregivers, when we are growing up. This is a really young age here. And it's too much to feel. The raw response is too intense, unsafe, and unsupported to be fully felt and expressed. And it gets buried. We build armory, we build a protection around it to keep it hidden. And this is, it's so, but this part is also hidden, but some of us have a memory, but it's more easy to remember the stories and identity and what happened to it rather than what we actually felt, what emotions felt. Because if the emotions repressed, it's not easy to remember there was emotion. It was just this fear or the contraction of it, right? Or that's what the body stores. So if you can feel that, the repression will make sure we actually remember as a stories and identity and what happens and what didn't happen and what should, we can kind of get into that. So that's an entry point, but we can't just be working on that, which I said earlier. So the most of personality isn't who you are, it's what you build to survive. So I had to avoid feeling and expressing anger myself to get love and safety by telling myself many different things like be nice, be small, be stupid, be ashamed, to keep my anger down, basically. So that means if you have emotional repression, the personality structure itself, like be nice, be small, be quiet, or it could be anything, be strong, don't cry, if you repress other emotions, is a survival strategy, not a character trait. So what I thought my personality was like being nice or being shy or whatever it is, it was more of a survival strategy to avoid feeling and expressing my emotions. So yeah. And you cannot think your way out of the body. The unfelt emotions and the fear of it is stored as contraction in the body, both subtle and gross. And this is just an example, like there's a pattern to the places where it shows up a lot in our bodies, like the chest or the cup or the jaw or the shoulders. The general, it could be very, not just in the physical gross body, but if people work with energetic field, the subtle body, it can really be contracted in energetic field as well. And that's why talking about it and working through it in your mind is not enough, and it doesn't really get to it. You have to come down to the body, really. We have many tools to come down to the body, to the contraction itself, as the science says now, the body keeps the score, right? So we must include the body. Well, it, it's a body. It's energetic work. You could say this work. So this is very simplified here. The repression is intelligent and it has needs. Because I could do a whole presentation just on needs and why we repress and how that drives the suffering, all of stuff. But basically, it hides behind busyness, spiritual bypassing, and intellectualization, and many other things, even behind the very stories and identities built to contain it. It is driven by unmet needs, so it can feel like an addiction, with strong unconscious compulsions to identify with and believe your thoughts. So just like on the surface level, we might have to have a glass of wine to feel okay, or to go for a walk, or to eat something to soothe ourselves because we don't want to feel something, and there's a compulsion to that. But at the deeper level, on the unconscious level, we're really addicted to believing our thoughts, so we can create a stories and identity about it, right? And that compulsion is very strong, and that's what builds this protection, really. Because as long as I'm believing I'm not good enough, it's and it's I take my eyes off it, and the compulsion to believe that the more you do this, well, you can really start to feel and see how much that is working unconsciously, the strength to believe in something, believe in the thoughts, to make it into something. So yeah, and it leads on to this. So a believed thought disappears. It becomes a world in itself and not a movement within it. So what I'm saying here is when you believe a thought, like I'm not good enough is a thought. Soon as I believe it, identify with it, it disappears, meaning I can't see as thoughts anymore. It's true. Like I am not, I am not good enough. Or there's a thought, I'm a failure. If only I could see as thoughts, but no, you can't because I believe it. So it disappears. It becomes my world. It's true, right? I'm a failure. I will defend it to death. Toshino, you're not a failure. No, yes, I am because of this, because of that, because of this, right? And it's all stories and identity. So what we do in this work to bring it back to how it really is, basically, each of the component, we kind of get it back to sensations as sensation, images and memories as memories, thoughts as thoughts. But we can see it if we believe it for what it is. So as soon as we believe something, it becomes unconscious. You could say it disappears. It's true. Like, what are you talking about? I am a failure. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. Even positive things, or what it doesn't matter, right? Because why do we do that? I said earlier. There's a compulsion. There's a need. There's a utility behind it. There's a benefit to believe in those things. What is that? At the the deepest need is to be safe from my emotions by expressing it, right? So there's a whole mechanism that's running. And this just explains why I said, I guess, as you make the repression program conscious, they are seen for what they really are. They can't stay. Meaning, if you see them for what they really are in awareness. So this is like 2D KI work, where if you can see the thoughts as thoughts and just allow that to be here in awareness, it cannot stay. If you're not believing it, if you can just allow that to be here, and your body will be reacting, and it will be there for a little bit. Maybe if it's really sticky, but if you fully allow things for what they are, it has to move through in awareness. So nothing's static, as you know. If you really start to tune into yourself, everything's changing, everything's moving. But if you're unconscious, we're trying to keep it there. We're stuck. It's contracted. So yeah. So when the belief is seen clearly, the energy frozen in the construct has nowhere to hide. It moves, it releases, it returns to the open flow of awareness. So that's what we do in the work, is to ask the body to let it show us, meaning to make it conscious of what we believe in unconsciously, to keep the emotions down. But when you see thoughts that we believe in, like big thoughts and greatest hits that we call it, I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, no one's gonna love me, I'm a failure. Those things that feels really true because of our traumas, that you still can see them as thoughts. That doesn't mean what happened to you didn't happen or anything like that, but you can actually see it for what it is. Then you can actually be present with it, and you can actually be here and now with it, present with it. So that's what the work is really. So now we now go towards the non-duality a little bit. So everything described here is not only modern somatic psychology, meaning depression work and all this somatic work and stuff, right? It is the living heart of non-dual wisdom. The non-dual mirror. Awareness constructs itself into experience of being a small, limited, separate self to meet and experience itself. So there's many ways to express this in many different traditions through, Shiva and Shakti dynamic, you know, Shakti as a mirror to Shiva itself so it can see itself, and all those, like consciousness knowing itself through the matter of the body and all that stuff, right? So it forgets itself so that it can remember again. This contraction is not a moral failing. It is the way infinite awareness plays at being finite. And be small, be ashamed, be strong over repression life is part of that contraction. Sorry, yeah, contraction, lived experientially. So so everything's awareness itself include the repressed emotions and the fear of it. So when we are conditioned to believe this emotion is not good or good, even as an adult, yes, I wish I could be angry and I could cry, or I could be sad and cry. There's a condition and that belief that's not the case. So I'm just, you can really start to experience how emotions are just emotions, and they're sacred. I put sacred emotion meaning they are who you are. It's not to do with stories and identity necessarily. So emotions that had to be repressed were never a problem or an enemy. They are an expression of individuality, which is consciousness itself, the power to be and move as an authentic individual. It was never foreign to itself. It is the self moving, meaning consciousness. For it to be individual, we have to have these emotions. You could say that's how I'm seeing, but not necessarily with the stories and identity that comes with. So, but not, it's not a mistake. It's not an enemy. We had to do that through our trauma, but it doesn't have to be that way. But I'll explain that why in a minute. So the conditioned self runs on the assumption something is missing and it must be obtained from outside. But that lack was never real. It was only the felt sense of the contraction itself. The contraction drives the seeking and finding, but what it's looking for was never outside. Meaning the contraction to move and to be separate, to that, the seeking energy to be something, the foundation of the contract self or separate self. If you really tune into it and through this work, you get to actually see it's almost like a physical energetic contraction itself that causes that lack. So, but it doesn't really exist when you make it into what it is, sort of thing. So you can actually experience what the non-dual pointing was saying, rather than understanding, it's just a separate self and there's nobody here, which can just be a bypass if the mind just needs to grab it, because that's what mind wants to do. It wants to use everything so that we don't have to feel something that we don't want to. But through this work, you can actually experience that as contraction, the movement to seek and to find, to be away from now, to find something that feels like it's missing. And you can put into a free contractions, many traditions talk about this as well. So one of them is like, can really feel like insufficiency, the root sense of being small, incomplete, limited, and not enough. Just like there's not enough for me. And that will kind of, from there, it can feel, it stems from that. It can feel like there's a separation, there's a sense of difference and disconnection, the loneliness of carrying what you can share. And then from that is the restless striving, the compulsion of doing. But you can really see this and feel this as a contraction, how that can be moved away through this work, basically. And that's what this conditioned self and contracted self is built on. Like, it can feel like, and that's what all these three things are there, or how we experience these separations and contractions. That's why. I mean, yeah. So the reversal here. So fear and love are the same energy moving in opposite directions. The fear of emotions contracts, and the love that wants to expand, to come out of repression and return to awareness is the same thing. The fear of feeling is an obstacle, is the doorway. Underneath the fear is the same love that caused the repression in the first place, now moving outward instead of inward. So this was quite an insight for me. So I've been doing repression work for, quite a while now, a few years now, and there was a clear insight that the part of me, the energy that I had to repress because I was so scared to express my anger, to feel them, so I won't get love and I'll be abandoned and all this stuff. But that same movement, that fear of my anger is exactly the same energy, that love that wants to come out and do the repression work itself. And I was like, wow, okay, so, but that doesn't mean whatever the mind thinks it is. So I just want to kind of point to the how, and that connects to the fear and love thing, because I had the fear was love too, because I was scared. So I was actually trying to protect myself from these things, right? And then without fear, I wouldn't be able to. So it's love, and that not necessarily understanding your mind, but I clearly saw this as an experience in myself to really see how that is no difference, or just the same coin of a different, no, different sides of the same coin, you could say. But it's not even that. They're not separate at all. But the difference is, what am I contracting or am I expanding, which I can go into, which I, express here. I had to contract. But that part of me that wants to expand again now is the same thing. So awakening isn't attainment, it's a recreation. I'm sure most of you know this if you've been around non-duality long enough. Consciousness records itself after a long dream of forgetting, not gaining something new, not achieving a new state, simply seeing what was always here. So you're not, and this is what KI is as well, you're not reprogramming yourself, you're deprogramming yourself, meaning you're unpacking stuff so you can actually remember, right? So it's about remembering, really. And suffering isn't the mistake, it's the invitation. The way to recognition that we just talked about is not around suffering, but through it, feeling and acknowledging it rather than fleeing from it, is what allows awareness to finally turn around and remember itself. So how do we recognize? I just don't know any other way but to recognize the suffering. The part of us, meaning suffering, meaning unconscious part of us, which cause us to suffer. Parts that we don't like about ourselves, we don't want to feel, parts that, we decided not, that it's not important, or it's not good, or it's just, we're just scared of, basically, the fear. And I spent all my life running from it, but through this work and through many recognition, through many, I don't know, experiences, I guess, suffering had to be acknowledged. Then everything opens up, and then you can really see the invitation of it. So yeah. Can everyone mute here when you're listening? Well, you're here, unless you want to speak. Actually, I'll mute you. Okay. So contraction doesn't disappear, it transforms. The energy that was contracted in the body as repression, as stories, as performance is not destroyed by being made conscious or being felt. It returns as the natural part of aliveness, the vitality and the potentiality that was always beneath the contraction. So it's just kind of repeating, but it's extending what I've just expressed earlier about, yes, we do the work and the contraction feels like it's dissolving and it's going somewhere, but it's not really disappearing or going anywhere. It's actually that energy, the contraction itself, is transforming, or you could say it's transfiguring. So it hasn't lost itself of that contraction, but it doesn't have to manifest as contraction. It's an expansion. It's it's fear turning into love, you could say, in another word, it's the same thing, right? So it's not about this, getting rid of things or dissolving things, although it can feel like that, but that energy is who you are and what you always have been, and it just transfigures and it just turns into aliveness, potentiality of yourself, creativity more than anything, right? So the more I've done this work, the potentiality and the for my capacity to be able to be here in presence is incredible. And then there's more potentiality. I notice the potentiality of absolutely everything now. But I was too scared to be here because I might feel the anger and had to express it. So I had to always be thinking about the future or past and all that stuff, right? And it's really scary because if you're here and now, that means you have to be in the body too, because body is always here and now if you can fully be here. But there's contraction in the body. There's things that you don't want to feel in the body. So all of that. So it's not a conclusion, but it's what I come to know is, so what I could really say is at this moment is I have been scared of myself, meaning emotions, because emotions are who I am. As I do more of this work, it's what makes Toshi individual is emotions before the stories and identity, and I could see, you see. And I was scared of those emotions. That means I was scared of myself, simply put. But then I thought, okay, so, but then I had to contract. I had to be scared of myself, right? So that must also mean I'm in love with myself too. Because fear is love, contracted. I had to contract to know myself because I love myself. Because I love myself, I had to be scared to be away, to protect myself from anger because I thought anger was bad or good or whatever it was, right? Through my experiences as I was growing up. So, but then it comes back to the same energy thing, and it's about remembering that. But the love I feel now is not, it feels different. It includes that fear. There's understanding of that fear. So it never lost its fear. And that's what embodiment really is to me, of not getting rid of that fear. It includes that fear. Its fear is just as relevant in this love consciousness, this part of who we really are, right? So yeah, so that's what the transfiguration is, I could say. I guess many tradition talks about this, but you can experience this through the work, much more efficient and much more, I guess, practical. Without kind of thinking about it and using your mind about it, because the mind just wants to come in, which is repression. It just can't help itself, which come from those contractions that I was talked about, and it just always wants to protect me. But non-dual experiences and message can't be used from the mind. Mind can only use it as an object. It can only notice object because it thinks it's a subject. And that divide, subject-object divide, the duality has to be maintained. But what I'm talking about, those two dissolving, right? So, and it can really experience that through, many different works maybe, but I don't know any other way that is more efficient, that includes all this tradition and what the real non-dual teaching suggestions were pointing to can be experienced to, basically. And I think, yeah, anyway. So, in another way, I put it is your undifferentiated awareness contracted into individuality so you could uncontract, expand back, and return transfigured. As embodied transcendence, as unified diversity. As embodied transcendence, meaning what I was talking about, we're not returning to just expand back to the emptiness, right? That emptiness, yes, emptiness is the case, but that also includes this body, the matter, which is empty at the same time. And this is where the mind can figure out. So all of this is included. This is the real embodiment. So I can speak from it, I can walk from it, I can live from it, and live from it in this relative thing that is empty at the same time. And it's not just a concept and idea. You can experience this in your body. Just like the consciousness. So that makes sense. The consciousness or body is where the consciousness meets itself. between the transcendence and the embody, or from the emptiness and form, all those conversations, right? So to simply put, non-dual embodiment is the natural radiance of awareness when it's no longer afraid of itself. And this might sound like words to some people, but just feel into energetically, and the more you do this work, this will make sense more and more. In my experience, so I'm sure many of you might experience in many different ways, but we 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 don't have to be afraid of ourselves. But that doesn't mean we don't get scared, you could say. But anyway, so that's that. So thank you for listening through all of that. That was quite longer than I thought. And there's a lot of kind of words there. But if anything, if people can just tune into what I was saying a little bit, it's okay. Because the more you do this work, you can really experience it. You can actually experience it rather than accumulating as knowledge. Because that's what repression wants to do, you know. Especially if if your life was being about knowledgeable, clever, all these things to get approval and all that stuff. So yeah, so this is the kind of whole package I'm kind of teaching and all that stuff. So it's about really clearing the body so you can really hear what those non-dual teachings or traditions are really saying. Because if you're contracted, if you have to believe in something, if there's a compulsion to believe in something, to use it so that we don't have to feel something, non-dual teaching is a great way to avoid ourselves, right? I was there for many long time, it's great thoughts are there to tick one box, to tick the boxes of not being able to feel anything. Like there's nobody here, there's nothing to do. It's a great way to avoid your self-dissociation, right? So we don't have to hear it. We can actually embody it. If you're not always fearing your body yourself, you can actually move from it, and it becomes the experience. Yeah, but then again, if you repress, and most of us, all this can be a bypass. It's, oh, Toshi said it's non-duality, it's this, it's that, and I don't have to feel something. It's fear and love, and any of these can be grabbed by the mind, repressed mind, to soothe yourself, to feel, it's soothing to believe something, but the pain must have to follow. When you get a pleasure from your addiction, or the soothingness, you get your hit, but the pain has to follow. That's what addiction and conditioning is, right? So then you have to keep coming back for more. I went back for non-duality. I had to come back for it, but I don't have to come back for it. It's here. I don't have to talk about it. But I talk about it because I love it, and I don't need to get anything from it.